Hello, everyone. I hope you're relaxed and having a good day. I recently came across some notes I made on February 14th, 1990, after talking to my mother, Rosie, or Rose, or Rochel, about some of her experiences during World War II. Surprisingly, I unexpectedly found these notes around February 14th of this year. My mother, like many others with similar experiences, rarely talked about them. This audio is to share parts of my mother and her three sisters' experiences. My notes might differ from recollections her sisters might have shared with my cousins. This audio, which I've titled as Four Sisters Leaving Auschwitz, was written and read by me, Michael Senderovich, in February 2026. My mother's family lived in the small village of Kaliny in Czechoslovakia in the Carpathian Mountains. Stories I have heard about her father suggest he was very involved in both the Jewish and non-Jewish communities, and his skills and contacts helped him to delay the eventual taking of his family. I can't imagine how my grandparents, Mordechai or Marcus and Rivka Erden, must have felt knowing their family of around 10 children plus grandchildren were being taken away when it finally happened. They buried valuables in the basement, sewed money and valuables into their clothes, and gave money to an older son, Sul, who went off to hide in the forests. There was also another son of Mordechai called Schneider. So in early 1944, my mother's family, which included the four sisters, Esther, my mother Rose, Frances, and Lily, were forced to leave their home and village, farmlands, and a local business store with the little they could carry. A good part of their traveling was done on foot. On a daily basis, they didn't know where they were going, and it stressed my mother even now, as she recalled how at times they would be sleeping in cemeteries for over a month. At some point, they were packed onto cattle wagons or trains and taken to Auschwitz. My mother recalls, with noticeable stress in her voice, the fear she had back then from the vicious, barking dogs and screaming soldiers that greeted them on their arrival to Auschwitz. She often repeated the fear and confusion that the barking dogs and screaming caused to all exiting the wagons or trains. They were separated into different lines. Their shivering parents, and I think an older sister with her child, into one line. The shivering four sisters into another line. The mother, with sad eyes, was looking at the sisters, probably an understatement. One of the younger sisters started to go into the parents' line, some thinking it would be safer to be with the parents. But as fate would have it, the infamous Dr. M of Auschwitz, I won't mention his name, yelled something like, Kinder, aber der Geist, German or Yiddish for child go there, into the line I put you in. How ironic. My grandparents' line went to the furnaces and to their passing. So, in a strange twist of fate, the infamous Dr. M saved the sister's life. A few years ago, I spoke to that sister, my aunt, and she told me the story with some minor differences. One of the first things that happened was that their clothes were taken. So much for the valuables and money they had carefully hidden in their clothes. At some point, they took off their clothes and their hair was shaved, and they were given big clothes and wooden shoes. My mother recalls how, when the sisters met again, they initially couldn't recognize each other. With shouting and screaming, the prisoners were put into blocks of about 1,000 people per block. 8 people with no pillows, packed in small areas like sardines. Each block was counted every morning, often starting at 4 a.m., and sometimes they would be on their knees for hours. No one could eat or relax until everyone of sometimes 20,000 people were accounted for, which often required long mornings of recounts. Regular scenes were bodies outside of the block, chimneys burning, and electric wires. Food was pitiful and included black coffee and soup with stones and worms. But the children, led by the aggressive Esther, the older sister, she was something, learned to find scraps and enter food ration lines more than once. A person helping to give out food, if you called it that, was from a neighboring village, which helped a bit. In a twist of fate, that person, Leitchu Lily, was a niece of my father Herman, who later met and married my mother. Leitchu and her sister Rochel lived through their war ordeals. Leitchu and Rochel's children were Marty and Freddie and Eugene and Anna. In another twist of fate, Leitchu, who helped the sisters in the food line, eventually met and married Ben, a person who my father's family had taken in because his parents had died before the war. Life is strange, how generations of families help each other without even knowing it at the time. Sneaking food was important, and I remember one story of how a dropped potato from one of the sisters' clothes resulted in my mother getting a bad beating after saying she had taken the potato. In Auschwitz, Dr. M would weed out people from different blocks to meet daily extermination quotas. Again, Esther, with her ears always to the ground, would be aware of which blocks to sneak the two younger sisters in or out of for safety if weeding was being done in or around their block. Attention was given to rubbing Lily and Francis's cheeks to make them look healthy so they wouldn't be picked. And so the daily life continued for many months until around September 1944, when Esther heard they were choosing a small group to travel to work somewhere else. They decided to take the chance, a real risk with unknowns, to be transferred. So the sisters went into a line, one by one, youngest to oldest, to try and be passed by Dr. M. So if one of the younger didn't make it past a checkpoint, then all could turn back. First Lil, then Francis, then my mother Rosie. They did it. They all made it. But wait, they actually turned Esther back. The girls were headed forwards. The three sisters with a cousin and a stranger in a group of 5. Groups were segregated into 5s in this lineup. And on the back flank, still in Auschwitz, what of Esther? No problem for a girl who had toned her skills by re-entering food lines at Auschwitz. Simply roundabout, comb your hair, put on your best lipstick and makeup, and ask Dr. M for a ticket. Sure enough, she got through on the next round. My mother would remark that Esther could go through a fire without getting burnt. But as always, a new problem to be dealt with had emerged. Esther wasn't in the same group of 5 as the other sisters, and staying together would prove to be difficult. So the stranger in my mother's group was asked if she would change places with Esther, which she agreed to do. The ragtag group of sisters was again at full strength, with Esther at the flank and the unknown up front. They also knew that information being what it was, they may have in fact volunteered and skillfully fought their way to the head of an extermination line. Groups of 5 were admitted to the next stage, and the girls thought nothing of the fact that their group of 5 was literally the last to be selected. What happened to the groups behind is probably part of the statistics of the Holocaust. As I think of this, I say a prayer for the neshama, the soul of the stranger in the line who let Esther join her sister's group, and a prayer for the many others who once were and didn't make it further into the present. The group of about 200 marched towards a train where they stayed all night within sight of the burning smokestacks. An administration problem had occurred, and more people were required for the furnaces. The relatively healthy group of girls who might stand a chance in the future were considered as a quick fix to the minor daily quota problem. But alas, the spirit of man and woman shows why we have survived through the ages. The grim task of unknown Jewish elders in the camp were helping to make decisions of how to weed out the really sick from the children potentially capable of surviving what was going on. Again, the wait continued. A stone throw on the one side from a train which supposedly would take them away, and a stone throw from a train on the other side, which was steadily unloading people for the day's furnace quotas. As the day continues, the group was led backwards towards a train, so they literally didn't know if they were moving to a train going out or to join the newly arriving crowds for the furnaces. My mother kept emphasizing over and over how tricky their captors were. So moving backwards was a particularly scary experience. Suddenly, and after the loss of parents, siblings, relatives, friends, acquaintances, and strangers, the Stay Together sisters boarded a train for the next step in their journey through Europe. That is the end of this chapter of the Four Sisters story about leaving Auschwitz. And I'm not getting into the next stages that occurred for the rest of the war. Stories include traveling through Europe on trains, going back to their home in Cologne, which was in disrepair, and finding all the valuables that were buried had been dug up and taken, finding their brothers Rochel, and more. I'm happy to say that all of the four sisters and their older brothers all lived past 80 years old, and they all had children and grandchildren. All the sisters continued to be extremely close throughout their lives. 3 sisters lived in Toronto, Canada, 1 sister in Israel, and the 2 brothers in Montreal, Canada. Children of the 4 sisters and 2 sons included David, Michael, Evan, Sarah, Ricky, Howie, Marky, Marty, Bobby, Mindy, Max, Morris, and Mark. I have to add 2 extra stories I just heard from Struhl's children and daughter-in-law. Struhl, the brother of the sisters, married his wife Lily after the war. On their wedding day, there were several people getting married, but there was only 1 wedding dress and possibly only 1 suit. So after their quick wedding, they had to give their clothes to the next couple getting married. Quite a twist to the old wedding saying, something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. The other story about Struhl's wife Lily is that apparently she was also in Auschwitz. Not a shared experience you want to go through. But unlike the 4 sisters, she didn't have a number tattooed on her arm. The reason for this was that when she arrived, she was put in a line headed for the furnace or to be gassed. But then a trainload of people arrived to be dealt with immediately, and she was taken out of the line. As the war was ending, she was again put in a line, probably a last-ditch effort by the captors to finish as many people as possible. But as fate would have it, the Allied forces came through the gates and she was saved. Her children, grandchildren, and many others are grateful for this. A question I often ponder was why the four sisters were able to live through the horrors. Esther, the older sister, certainly played an important role. Knowing my mother Rose, the next oldest, I know how she always selflessly responds and takes care of family and people around her, so I'm sure she played a strong role. In regard to the younger, they didn't have time to be complaining children. They had to spontaneously rise to many challenging situations. In Viktor Frankl's classic book, Man's Search for Meaning, he outlined how many survivors of World War II, including himself, needed a meaning and purpose in life to make it through the challenges to survival. I think this applies to the four sisters. The younger ones needed the older ones, but the older ones needed the purpose of helping the younger ones to be driven to survival. If they only had to take care of themselves, I'm not sure how things would have developed. Remember, being in Auschwitz in early 1944 was generally not a timeline for survival. Through my own personal experiences, I have seen that good can come from bad. This doesn't mean that the bad didn't happen and wasn't horrible, but it means that you can do something about it. You have to make the best of a situation and keep looking and moving forward for the benefit of both you and the people around you. And at a different level, they survived through the grace of God, possibly with the help of the prayers their parents would have prayed for them in their final moments. I can't imagine the prayers of my grandparents, Mordecai and Rivka, must have been praying for their children as they understood what was happening. When you think of them, my grandparents, in their final moments, you understand emotional pain, prayer, love, and the grace of God. May God bless and take care of the neshama souls of each of my grandparents, Mordechai, Marcus, Ben, son of his father Schneer, and of Rivka Bus, daughter of her father Zerman. And may God bless and take care of the neshamas of my parents, Rose, Rochel, Bus Mordechai the Rivka, and Herman Tzvi, Ben, son of his parents, Chaim David Vachel. And may God bless and take care of the neshamas of each of Esther, Francis, Lily, each Bus, daughters of their parents, Mordechai and Rivka, and each of the neshamas of Shmuel and Schneider, Ben Mordechai. Thank you for listening.